Good morning. My name is Martin Rauchbauer, and I would like to welcome you to our third edition of Open Salon. I'm the co-director of Open Austria. Next to me, Earl Schaffer, the deputy director at Open Austria, and together we're going to be your hosts through our third edition of Open Salon on a very pertinent and important and relevant topic, cybersecurity. Too close to home, how cyber threats hit us in new and unprecedented ways. We have a number of very interesting experts as our guests, and we will talk to them as the hour proceeds, but we also want to know what you think, and please participate by asking us questions. There's a Q&A button in Zoom. You can also, of course, send us your messages via chat, and we will try to include your questions at any moment during our discussion with our panelists and experts. And also, we give you the opportunity to voice your opinion, because we have also prepared two polls for you, and we're actually going to start right now with one, our first poll. And please participate and give us your opinion. That's, of course, if you are watching this live and not later our recording. So our first poll is a question to you. When you work from home, do you feel less or more vulnerable to cyber threats than in your office? When you work from home, do you feel less or more vulnerable to cyber threats than in your office? And we see you're already actively participating. A few seconds more, then we're going to end this poll. And here are the results, and I hand it over to you, Earl.
Yes, thank you, Martin. That is interesting. So our first guest, we're going to talk about the results of this poll with our first guest, who is going to be Gerhard Eschelbeck, who is the Digital and Technology Advisor for the International Olympic Committee. He has spent his whole career in the security industry. Among other positions, he was also the Vice President of Security and Privacy Engineering at Google. Gerhard, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And let's dive right in. So let's share the results right now. Most people say they feel more vulnerable working from home than in the office. Maybe you can comment on that. Do you have any hunch, do you think, why that is? Why people might feel more vulnerable right now?
Well, first of all, good morning, everybody. It's great to be here today. And certainly the results that we are seeing here are not really surprising me in many ways. I think it's very consistent with what I see with some of the companies that I'm working on a day-to-day basis. And I think what's happening here with Corona in particular, especially the last few weeks, is this huge shift of people working suddenly outside of the protected corporate networks is part of what drives that additional vulnerability that we are perceiving here. When we think about it, networks over the years have been built on the premise that everything inside your corporate firewall is deemed to be safe. Everything outside of the corporate firewall is deemed to be bad. And so therefore, suddenly, with a situation where probably more than 80–90% of your employees are being outside your firewall, that perception of vulnerability is clearly stronger. And I think it's a reflection of the fact that we have a bigger threat landscape evolving now as well with Corona that we can talk about as well if we like today, what it means. But again, I'm not surprised about the results, and it's reflective of what I see as well.
With that being said, do you think that there's more cyber threats out there right now than what there was before, or do you think that's a bias and we're just more exposed to them than we were before?
Well, what we are seeing really is not necessarily a change in the dynamics of the threat landscape, but what we see is the themes are being adopted towards Corona. We see, of course, actors, malicious actors, leveraging the Corona theme for their phishing emails, for their scam emails, for their malware distribution. And so it's all about targeting individuals, and it's all about enticing them to open that bad email, be it a phishing link or be it a malicious email that contains a keylogger or contains some ransomware. So it's all about using the latest keywords that people are interested and curious about, giving updates on Corona, talking about how is your city doing from a Corona perspective. So sometimes very targeted phishing attacks are happening that, of course, it's all about targeting individuals and making sure that they are opening those emails. But at the same time, there's also some new themes that we see emerging, specifically because of Corona. Some of the malicious actors are opening new domains. They're creating domains with names like Corona in themselves and whatnot there. And it's all about using the opportunity to target more and more people opening those domains and websites in the future, where they're hosting, of course, malware and other forms of attack to the user. So there's a variety of themes that are changing because of Corona, is in everybody's mind and is everybody's interest there, and it's all about targeting individuals.
What do you think is the main motivation for people or organizations to engage in cybercrime? Is it a financial reason? What is it?
Well, you have a range of actors, and certainly on the very top tier, you have kind of nation state activities, which is all about espionage. So this is clearly about targeting individuals within organizations, employees of organizations, for the purpose of espionage. This could be technical, political, it could be many different types of espionage. But then on the lower end of the tier, you have kind of the financially motivated targeted attacks, which is all about financial gains and leveraging credit card information, bank account information. Access to your accounts is very powerful for some of those financial crimes.
Gerhard, I have also a question regarding the threats and the challenges that you've mentioned, maybe also opportunities for businesses to react to these changes. Do you think that there are new business models that kind of react to this new threat landscape?
Oh yeah, indeed. I do think Corona has in many ways accelerated a trend that has been in the works. And the trend is known in the industry as called zero trust networks. If you want to Google, it's actually something that Google has started in the early days. I think we started this 2014-15, and you can read a very popular white paper about it under the Beyond Trust model. And what it's all about, it's essentially changing that premise that everything inside the network is good and everything outside the network is bad. The idea is fundamentally that there is no trusted devices anymore, and every device has to earn its trust every time it's connecting to a network, be it inside or outside the network. And so this is a very big shift in network architectures, and drives actually some of the innovation in the space as well. So some companies are now using that model that we have pioneered in Google in the early days and building it out as companies, and hopefully many organizations will adopt that Beyond Core or zero trust network model in the future as a way to build a more robust and more reliable and secure network.
Now, Gerhard, we won't let you go as the former VP security at Google to ask you a little bit about the insight you had in that position until fairly recently. So everybody's affected by cyber threats. As a consumer, as an individual, as a citizen, the governments are affected. Some of them are actively being threats. And then, of course, the big tech companies as well. If you look at this entire ecosystem of cyber security, what is your insight from your time as a VP security at Google? How can these different actors play together to improve the security landscape?
Yeah, no, certainly. I think during the time I was heading security at Google, it clearly became very clear to me that Google has probably the largest and most sophisticated security team on staff. So that's a big part. And security is, of course, also a game of economy. There is a play of economy here. So the size of a team certainly matters in many ways. But we also realized at the same time, we couldn't do it alone. And so we had some great partnerships with some of the other peers in our industry, with some of the other larger organizations, to exchange threat information, to really have real-time visibility, what we all collectively see on the internet in terms of malware, and especially some of the nation-state actors. For them, it's not about they're launching the attack overnight. This is very carefully planned, and they're doing some early testing in the weeks and days before. And so if you can catch those early tests on, you can certainly prevent the next big cyber attack, no matter who it happens to. So there was no sense of competition really amongst us companies here. It was really more a let's work together in order to protect the internet as a whole and make the world a safer place to be.
Wonderful, Gerhard. We will leave it at that for now, but we will see you later on when we, towards the end of Open Salon, have all the panelists come back again for a small and short panel discussion. Thank you so much, Gerhard, for now. And I would like to now introduce our next guest. Our next guest has a very interesting background, Michael Daniel. Michael is the president and CEO of the Cyberthreat Alliance. And Earl is going to bring him up in a moment. The Cyberthreat Alliance is kind of an industry alliance with many security companies working there together. But Michael has a very interesting history, as he worked in the Obama administration from 2012 to 2017 as the White House's cybersecurity coordinator. So you have a pretty good bird's view on the security landscape, both from a governmental as well as from a private sector point of view. If you look at that security landscape, how has it evolved over the last years? And now that you've left the government, what has changed your perspective?
Sure. Well, thank you, Martin. Thank you, Earl, for having me here today. Happy to participate. I would say that when you look at the threat landscape, you can see it evolving in a few different ways. One is that the threats are becoming broader. And by that, I mean that, one, we continue to hook up many different devices to the internet. So, you know, when I first started doing cybersecurity, we were still primarily concerned about wired desktops. And now, of course, the threat landscape includes, you know, your watch, your refrigerator, your car, the power plant, anything you can think of, practically, we're hooking it up to the internet. And all of those devices are different. They work on different protocols, they have different ways of interacting, and so the security methods you have to use to deal with that threat landscape have changed. But it's also bigger. And one of the interesting things about cyberspace is it's one of the few domains I know of where there's more of it on a daily basis. Because we keep adding devices to cyberspace, it literally gets bigger every day. That's not true for, I mean, I know the Chinese are building some islands in the South China Sea, but I mean, generally, like, there's not more land, right? There's not more air, but on a daily basis, there's more cyberspace. And so that's one of the biggest trends that we have to deal with. The other one that I would point out is that the level of digital dependence continues to rise. And this is actually something that's been accelerated by the pandemic. But if you look back, like when I started my government career in the mid 1990s, if the network went down, we just did something else for the day, right? We worked on our non-networked computers. We actually used a phone that was on our desk to call somebody. And now we're all very, very digitally dependent. And most organizations require the internet and access to the internet to even function. And so those two big trends have really made a huge difference in how the, you know, both the, how the threat has evolved. And then I would add probably a third trend, which is there's just more actors out there. the cyber criminals have moved in a big way. They figured out that there's a lot of money to be made and relatively low chances of getting caught or punished. Nation states have figured out that cyberspace is a great place to carry out your national priorities, whether espionage or disruption. So there's a lot more actors, active in cyberspace.
So the three trends are there are more threats, there are more actors, and we're more dependent because the digital world has become more important. In fact, today the Austrian government released a report on the crime statistics of 2019 compared to the previous year, and crime in Austria is very low, and it really stayed the same, except for cybercrime, which went up 50%. 50%. That's a very large number. So it just gives you a little insight into one small country's issue with cybercrime. I would like to ask you a little bit about the actors and the threats. What kind of actors are out there, and what kind of damage do they cause? Are there like figures that give us a bit of an estimate of the extent of the problem?
That's actually one of the biggest challenges we have, is that the statistics are very hard to come by. And sort of getting a sense of the overall damage, for example, to economies due to cybercrime is really hard. And the estimates they vary so significantly that I have trouble putting stock in any of them. But one thing they share is they're all big. So clearly the effect is significant. I would really classify 4 types of actors. One is you have your cyber criminals, and these are the people in the organizations that are in it for the money. Their goal is to make money, and they're by far the largest type of actor that you encounter, malicious actor that you encounter in cyberspace by a very wide margin. Again, the estimates are difficult to come by, but certainly if you classify the volume of malicious activity that my member companies see within the Cyber Threat Alliance, easily 80–90% of the malicious activity is criminal related. Then you have your nation state actors that are trying to achieve their national security goals. So either carrying out espionage, intellectual property theft for whatever reason, or they're trying to create effects, such as disruption, of various processes or critical infrastructures. You also have terrorist organizations, which primarily use the internet to recruit, but also would seek to cause physical damage if they could through the internet, and use it as a command and control system for their operations. And then I would also say you have your hacktivists, the ones that are trying to achieve some other kind of political goal through activity in cyberspace.
Now, we called today's session Too Close to Home, and that kind of alludes to this general assumption that Corona has changed the cyber security landscape, and that we've become more vulnerable and that it's gotten even worse. Is that the case?
Well, I think that we have certainly increased some of our vulnerability. As Gerhard was talking about, you've now got people that we have very rapidly had to move our workforce into a much more distributed architecture. So you've got people working from home, where perhaps they're maybe not on a VPN the way that they were at an office. They may not be behind as robust security protocols and protections. And so you've distributed your workforce in a very rapid fashion. So I definitely think that the vulnerabilities have increased. I think people are also, you're talking about home environments where there's a lot more personal devices that are attached to them that are probably not as well protected as, many corporate devices. That said, I also don't think the volume of malicious cyber activity has really gone up all that much. I think it's changed its focus. I think you've seen a very rapid shift to coronavirus and COVID-19 themes, and the bad guys are preying on that. But I don't think the overall volume has increased all that much.
Thank you so much, Michael. I will give you later a chance also in the panel maybe to talk a little bit about the future and what CTA does in order to mitigate those threats. But for the moment, thank you very, very much. And we'll move on to the next panelist.
Thank you.
Yes, we will be talking with Manuel Netball. He is the co-founder and CTO at ShieldX Networks, a company that helps other companies protect their IT infrastructure on the cloud. And as soon as Manuel is one of the panelists, we will see him pop up on the screen. Hey, Manuel. You are on mute right now. Let me unmute you. You're unmuted now. Perfect. All right. Well, Michael just talked about it, that a lot of companies had to act really quickly and move their whole workforce on remote. And a lot of their data has moved on the cloud. What are the security implications that these changes bring with them, would you say?
Yeah, perfect. And thanks for having me today. Happy to participate. I think the cloud computing movement, first of all, has had the first wave of effects on your traditional perimeter. So Gerhard talked about the firewalls, the inside, the outside. I think the perimeter that was traditionally protected by the firewalls is now dissolved. And this is because, first of all, the cloud adoption. So there's more and more devices, more and more services being utilized in the cloud. And the second aspect, you also have many more devices connecting into your data center. Both of those effects actually dissolve the perimeter and actually weaken your security posture that you had earlier with your traditional firewalls. And they were very effective at the boundary, but now I think you need a complete reshift in terms of what you're going to do for security. And we heard from Gerhard about zero trust as well, but I believe we need a new way to also defend from within the data center as well.
And so how would that new way look like defending inside the data center, especially since a lot of the data is not only on one cloud, but actually on multi-cloud platforms now? How can you keep the security perimeters up?
Yeah, perfect. So we refer to this at ShieldX as hyper-automation, which means you need a system that is really in lockstep with the changes that are happening. We've seen thousands of new services being provisioned for the remote workforce participants, and so these systems, they got provisioned maybe in a matter of minutes. Traditionally, security took maybe weeks to order a device, to bring it up, plug it in, configure it. So I think there's a big discrepancy between the speed of which the IT organization operates versus the speed at which the security organization can operate. That's why I think we need to rethink how, especially also network security, is delivered and how it is automated. And I think it has to become hyper-automated so that it really is in lockstep with those changes. And it never misses an additional thing that is brought up in the cloud, especially also inside data centers. There's tons of changes that are happening every day. We have customers that undergo hundreds of changes every day, but the security team can only handle maybe one or two. So by changing the way how you deliver security, you also remove the chances of misconfiguration or having certain devices open to the public. So
what are some security holes that generally that you see hackers use in, cloud infrastructures?
Especially recently, we've seen hacks into VPN devices. A lot of devices connect via VPN to the office. We've seen vulnerabilities from Citrix or Pulse Secure, VPN servers, and others. And the interesting thing there is that the attackers, they're not just about, that their goal is not just to breach these devices. They're planting something that they can use subsequently to further penetrate into the data center and then use things like ransomware, like so the snake kits, the Ryuk, Sodino Piki. These are examples for ransomware that hit the networks very hard, and they are then encrypting sensitive data, they're exfiltrating that data out, and then they're charging ransomware for getting the data back.
So can you give us an example, or in general talk a little bit about, for a company that has been compromised in their cloud security infrastructure, do other companies or other brands who are also on that same platform have to worry about being infiltrated as well through that, you know, gap that one company had?
It's perfect. Yeah, exactly. And this is also called the multi-tenancy problem. So as soon as you have multiple tenants on the same infrastructure, there is always the risk that one attack that has hit one organization, even also one department in one organization, is spreading to the other, because there's within the data center, there's very little protection. There is now the concept of zero trust, of course, but usually zero trust is applied to devices and to the endpoints. I think I'm advocating here that this gets further introduced inside the data center as well. And this is where you need a lot more automation and a rethinking of how security is delivered.
Maybe as one of the last questions, how can companies or organizations protect themselves against these security holes, especially if they're also dependent on other companies on the same platform taking security measures as well?
Mm-hmm. So one way is, of course, the zero trust platform, where you bolster your endpoint security strategy. You need to make sure that the devices are known. You have a catalog of those devices. You make sure that you have maybe multi-factor authentication. You make sure that you have behavioral detection, so that the behaviors of these devices, if they change, you get notified. But this is one part of the solution. The second part of the solution has to be within the data center and where the attackers are actually then trying to get the data from. And this is where I think a rethinking has to happen of how security is delivered. And again, this needs to be fully automated and actually supplemented with machine learning and artificial intelligence, so that the IT team is not putting too much strain on the security team, right? And security teams today, they cannot react fast enough, so that creates then this discrepancy of protection and the lack of security within.
Manuel, the last question, you just mentioned it, artificial intelligence and machine learning. And we had you on a panel, I think it was last year at the RSA, on that very topic. Could you just comment a little bit about how important machine learning and AI have become in cybersecurity, both on the defenders and on the attacker side?
Yeah, I think a lot of what's going to happen right now, and especially this year, is primarily driven based on machine learning, right? So the attacks, they are usually trying to also evade detection. If you have sandboxes that try to catch malware, they're smart enough to detect that they're in a sandbox these days. So there's a lot of counter measures that the attackers are applying to further penetrate the data centers. On the other side, I think the security teams should be ahead a little bit more and should start to embrace actually more machine learning and more AI to help the security team be smarter and faster. I think I don't see our security teams that are customers of ours really embrace AI fully. So they always want to be in control for the last step, where they're saying, I want to be the decision maker if a certain workload is being removed because it has been infected. But they always embrace AI much more than they have done in the last couple of years.
Well, thank you, Manuel, for the insights on cloud technology and also a little bit of an overview over artificial intelligence.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Next, we have Shani from Izon, Shani Tropper. She is an online manager at Izon, which is an Austrian video conferencing tool that is being used widely in Austria and around the world, that has seen an incredible uptick in users over the past couple of weeks and months. Izon was also one of our Go Silicon Valley participants last year. They were here at TechCrunch and they went through our program. So Shani, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start right off with talking about video conferencing. I feel like everybody has at least, several hours of video conferencing every day now, or at least gets invites for video conferencing solutions. There's a lot of them out there. Can you give us a little bit of an overview of the safety issues that come with video conferencing?
Yeah, like you said, we're all stuck at home during social distancing, and lots of people have started to use video meetings that have never used it before, not only for work, but also with family and friends. And there's a trend that's become a problem for users because you probably heard of Zoom bombing. It's when random people have hacked into video meetings and gone as far as injecting inappropriate meetings. It sounds funny to some, but it's really not. It's sparked a lot of discussion as well, and people are not feeling as safe during video meetings anymore. So yeah, it's been an important topic recently.
And I think that's especially important to also decide or divide between the end consumer or people who use it for in their personal lives, and also people who use it for business. And especially for businesses, Zoom bombing or any video conferencing that can be, have security holes, that creates a big problem for their whole system, because a lot of times sensitive information is being shared. How can you stay safe during video calls?
I think the most important part is to be well informed. I know it's not as easy for everyone, but you really have to know how to use your video meeting tool. Inform yourself about what you have to do in order to keep your meeting safe. That's different for every different video meeting provider. And some are designed in a way that are much safer than others. But generally speaking, I think it's just to be informed and just know the tool, know how to mute yourself, know these basics before you get into a video call. I think being prepared, knowing what to do beforehand is what matters.
And so what do you guys at Izon do to keep your customers safe?
We as a meeting provider have to make it easy for users. So basically we ensure that the safety measures are high by providing two different ways of inviting people. One is a quite standard way of inviting someone beforehand, and the other way is much safer. That's the option for somebody who really wants to keep their standards high and safe. And that is by sending a quick join link, which is created right when the meeting starts. So basically the link doesn't exist before the meeting, which makes it virtually impossible for a hacker to hack in right beforehand. We're also browser-based, which means you can't download some malware. It's much harder for hackers to join a video meeting room when it's in your browser and there's nothing installed on your computer. So there's quite a lot of things to consider, and like I said before, it's important to keep in mind what you have to do in order to have a safe meeting. But generally speaking, I would say browser-based video meeting tools are definitely safer than the ones where you have to download a client.
And can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Why are the browser-based ones safer?
Well, when you download a client, you can, so there's an example, for example, you had people that got an invitation for a Zoom call, and they opened the invitation and it carried a malware that basically was in their client. So basically they had an easy time joining in on a video meeting. They didn't even need a video meeting room link in order to join in or Zoom bomb, because the malware was on their client. And with a browser, you don't have that. Browser-based tool, you basically go to that site, you open a video meeting link and you send it. And for Izon, that means the video meeting link is generated right when you start the meeting. So there's really not a lot of options, and it's much harder for somebody to enter.
Well, and I've actually learned in talking with you and with Andreas, the CEO, that a lot of organizations or some organizations with very high security standards are actually using your solution as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about what their exact needs are for a video solution, and why and how they got a hold of you and how they decided to use IZON?
So basically why they're using IZON is exactly that differentiation that we're making with normal randomly generated links that you can send out before a meeting, and the other ones that are generated right in the moment when a meeting starts. So it's really safe way of inviting someone, and what they need is to start a meeting, ensure that no one else is joining, and then they just lock the room and no one can join. They have a list and see exactly who is in. It's basically really important for them to see that nobody is joining in and listening to their conversations, because their safety measures or standards are much higher.
So then, do you think this whole conversation about security in video calls, do you think that's going to stick around? That's going to be a lasting phenomenon?
I think there's always going to be threats, cyber threats to some extent, but I think it's going to get a lot harder. The discussion that has been sparked with the Zoom bombing and everything going on has caused companies to really focus on safety. I know for us, it's been a huge topic recently, even more so than at the beginning, because, you know, people care about safety and online cybersecurity. And as we saw on the poll at the beginning, I mean, people are feeling less safe now that they're home. So that also means to me that people are interested in having safe video meetings and safe online journey, basically.
Shani, I want to also mention something that is probably pretty obvious to everybody. We are talking to you about IZON, and we're using Zoom, which is kind of an irony, and I want to address it because I know it's a bit the elephant in the room. And quite frankly, yes, we've used it because not of security. We know about the security issues, but we use it for convenience. Because we like the flashy, nice virtual backgrounds that you'll see, because they help us create this atmosphere of a salon. But I have to also disclose, IZON is an Austrian company, and Open Austria is about helping Austrian companies connect to Silicon Valley and to innovation. And we will work with you on devising maybe a new format as well. But I wanted to ask you about this issue of security versus convenience, and what your take is, and what you feel that customers really think when they have to make a choice between these two trade-offs.
Well, if you want my honest opinion or my honest experience, it depends on the country where they're from. There's some countries that care much more about it than others. Generally speaking, in the US, from what our customers, I can tell, in the US, people care more about convenience and not so much about having a super safe meeting. Whereas in Europe, I think there's much more concern about safety, at least from our clients. That's all I can say.
Well, Shani, thank you for taking the time and joining us today and having this conversation. And like Martin said, we do want to work with you to set up a new format as well for a different event series where we use IZON a little bit more. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your experience. And I think a lot of people are going to go away and knowing that there is tools out there that can keep you a lot safer. And I'll hand it over right to my colleague Martin again.
Yes, so we have another guest waiting, and I'm going to bring her up right now. This is Jamie Fitzgibbon, the founder of Renaissance Insight, and a longtime collaborator and friend of Open Austria. But before I want to ask you something, Jamie, and welcome to our panel. I want to start with our last poll, which will involve you, the participants. We just talked about this trade-off between security and convenience. So we want to know how important this is for you guys. We will start by asking you, are you willing to trade off cybersecurity for convenience? Yes, no, it depends. That's of course another possibility to answer. So please answer our questions. Are you willing to trade off cybersecurity for convenience? And you are answering this question. I see the results are coming in a few more moments. We will wait until this poll closes. Are you willing to trade off cybersecurity for convenience? Now, it's going to be interesting to look at the result, as we have a lot of people from Silicon Valley in our webinar, but also from Europe. We will see if there is maybe an interesting mix here. So I'm ending now the poll, and the results are no, people are not willing. In the majority of cases, half of the respondents say they are not willing to trade off cybersecurity for convenience. 41% say it depends. That's of course also a very reasonable answer. And only 9% are willing to trade off cybersecurity for convenience. What do you say to that, Jamie?
So I actually think that we're probably asking the wrong question because really 100% security means zero access. I mean, if you want to clamp this down, we can do that, and then you have no convenience and no access. But I really think we need to think of, I believe we need to think about this problem in a slightly different context of security married with privacy. And when we look at it that way, the access, the convenience, the usability is really wrapped around sort of this element of privacy and when it matters and what is at risk. So it's more of looking at what is the risk before us. Obviously, depending on what your activity is, there's greater risk and less risk in that engagement. But it becomes more of an issue of controlling your data, and that's the critical element. And data can be, it's not just emails and contents of the emails. It's not just PII, but it's all the pieces of information that's given about your IP address, whether you're using VPN, all these other, and even interactions, the behavioral activity. So if we think about security and cybersecurity, it's really, as Michael Daniels was saying, the threshold is growing day by day, or not the threshold, but the landscape. So with more and more solutions coming online and devices, whether that's your refrigerator, whether that's a new trinket that you're wearing on your person, the information that's given about a person or a company is increasing dramatically. And it's currently set up as a cat and mouse sort of game, right? Where security's trying to catch up to where the risk is and where the threats are. But I think we need to revisit what the threat actors are really after is data, because that's the gold. And how do you rethink that dynamic of interacting with the data, protecting that data, and recognizing what is valuable and what is not? Like, what can you give away that really has low risk for your family or your corporation?
You're pointing out to something very interesting. You're pointing out to the fact that it's not so much only about your defenses, but it's also about what you are defending. So what do you advise your clients whom you advise on cybersecurity? And I think you advise both the private sector as well as a government, and you have a long, extensive experience in the US government. What do you advise them to focus on if in reality their privacy is at stake?
That's a tough question. I would say what you would want to focus in on, and what we advise is really how do you need to interact? How do you need information to flow? And look at that information sharing dynamic, right? And I like actually Shani's point about, you know, rethinking how you share that information. The meeting invite doesn't go out until, it's not active until you need that meeting, and then it's gone, right? So rethinking how to just create and dispose of data in a way that actually reduces that risk dynamic, and rethinking the architecture. I know Gerhard was talking a lot about the changing architecture to zero trust. Well, I think we need to go further in reimagining the architecture beyond just zero trust of devices, but zero trust in any of our interactions and all the lineage of data that we're giving away, and what does that mean for our architect of the services that we leverage, the systems that we build, and those interactions. So it's both the data, how we create and dispose of data, and then how do we manage that interaction.
That's fascinating. So in a sense, we have to look a little bit at how to make these attacks less likely. And of course, we need to look at the security architecture, the defenses, the walls. But we also need to look at the actual value that our data, that the thing they are after is providing. And do I understand you correctly that you are kind of saying, well, why if we why don't we try out making this what they're after less valuable for them, and that will then decrease the likelihood of attacks?
Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying.
Right.
Really, yeah, reimagining the equation instead of trying to solve the same problem.
Now, I would like to go back to the fact that you've advised government a lot, and you know how government works. Open Austria is, of course, also a governmental organization. How is the equation there different? Governments are not after profits. Bureaucrats have, I'm a bureaucrat myself, have a different mindset probably. When you advise governments about cybersecurity, what are the main insights, and what are the kind of recommendations for government in particular?
Well, obviously government has a different dynamic in that they can't just dispose of data. There's a lineage. You have to keep, you know, your coffers of multi-year data for auditing and other things. And they have to balance public interest with really, you know, their operations. So they're having to make sure they're transparent and doing the things that a democracy asks of the government, but also that they are secure and they are locking in certain things. So what I have counseled in different areas is really looking at reimagining their architecture a little bit, in that are the systems that they have, are they just bolting on new locks on the same door? Or are they taking out the door and thinking we're in a new era? And that, I think that tees up to this next thing, is we can't continue to operate when the internet first was created, right? The internet is a little bit broken, and we're having to live in this sort of broken space. So how do you leapfrog a little bit and say, we can't keep tacking things on, and we have to, at some point, rebuild the way we do business? And that, to me, that's the same for a multinational corporation as it would be to a large government. Is you have to still allow business to get done. You can't break down that convenient usability and access, but you also have to start reimagining how you do that business.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Now we have brought all the other panelists back in again, and I want to ask a general question to you guys, and whoever wants to pick it up. It's our kind of final round of this panel on Too Close to Home. So I would like to ask you, if we look forward, if we look into the future, because we're very much now kind of caught up in the moment, in this attention on the current crisis, and you know, working from home, etc. But if you want our participants to take one important lesson back home from how to tackle cyber threats. And if we look in the long perspective, if we look in the future, and not just on the current crisis, what is the one thing you would like them to take away? And I maybe start again with Gerhard, putting you on the spot there, but then whoever wants to interact.
Yeah, sure. Happy to take this one, Martin. I think in my mind, one of our biggest historical dependencies and will be an opportunity for change in the future, significant change in the future, is our continuous reliance on passwords. Passwords fundamentally are a dead concept, and they're the #1 reason why we are exploited every single day through phishing emails and other mechanisms. So I do think, and this comes back to this convenience versus security discussion. Why do we use passwords? Well, they're convenient, but not really they are secure. And so therefore, I think the notion of multi-factor authentication, in particular, some two-factor authentication with an additional component in addition to the password. And this is another area where I had some significant work done over the past years in Google. This is called a security key. And it's a little device here, similar to the car keys that we are using. And you can't log on to your computer. You can't log on to your network if you don't have your key and your password in the combination, therefore. And so you can play this out in many different ways. But to me, this is one of our biggest opportunities over the next 5 to 10 years to get rid of passwords.
Who else wants to pick up that question?
So I'll take a stab at it, Martin. I think that, well, I will say that one of my mantras when I was at the White House was, I want to kill the password dead. So to Gerhard's point, that is certainly something that we need to do. But I think one of the bigger policy changes we need to think about is actually how we do collaboration against the malicious actors, against the bad guys. The traditional model is that is a purely government responsibility. And due to the nature of the way that cyberspace works, a nodal network that operates at light speed, that model just simply doesn't work. And in fact, we're going to need the governments to work with cybersecurity providers, with platform providers, service providers, and the organizations out there to collaboratively go after what the bad guys are doing. And I'm not arguing that we should be, I'm not advocating for hackback or, you know, crazy stuff like that. But what I am saying is that we need to have governments doing what we want governments to do, and the private sector doing what we know the private sector is very effective at, doing it together in space and time, in a way that we can actually generate strategic effects on the adversaries and really start to impose much more significant costs on them than we have been able to do to date.
And maybe just as a follow-up, what is the difficulty? What are the obstacles about these working together, sharing maybe information that you encounter?
Sure. I mean, there's unfortunately a lot of challenges to that. I mean, some are technical. In other words, you've got to actually have the standards in place to actually share the information back and forth. But there's also cultural challenges. You know, it's very difficult for governments to sort of make that cultural shift into actually recognizing that they have to work with the private sector. There's legal barriers, there's privacy issues, there's all sorts of policy and regulations that we have to overcome. So we're only at the beginning stages of this effort, and we've seen it work, but mostly in ad hoc and very sort of limited informal ways. And we really need to scale that up to have a global impact, and we need to be able to do it much more rapidly.
So I'm going to put Shani on the spot there. What is the one takeaway, looking into the future, you would like our participants to take away? You have to unmute.
Okay, sorry.
We hear you now.
Okay, so I guess because you're mentioning looking into the future, my takeaway for everyone would be to stay informed. And also, if you have children or anyone who is younger, make sure that they're informed as well. It's not just comfort. It's important for children to know that these safety standards should stay high. They shouldn't go any lower, because you know, kids are young, and it's important to keep them safe.
Great. Jamie.
So I would say there's a great analogy. You know, this session's about the threats coming too close to home. And there's a good analogy that Chris Schroeder, the founder and CEO of Gray Market Labs, has put forward of this glass house. So even if we go back to our corporations, it's still the fact that all of our interactions, 90% of the data we give away is our behavior. And so I would hope that while we are, yes, in our actual physical homes today, and we're more aware of risk, that as we go back to our corporations, we are realizing that we are working and living in these glass houses. And it doesn't mean we don't put locks on the doors and we don't continue those type of things, but I would really say rethinking how we secure data, which is the piece that cyber criminals are. And so that would be, as we move forward, keeping that.
Right. Thank you, Jamie. I do have to say we have one question, which is a very technical question, and I'm not sure if it's addressed to you, Jamie, or to whoever would like to answer it. It's about risk assessment, and here's what the question says. I would be interested what method of risk assessments are used. Are risks aggregated, and are specific tools used for that? As standards like ISO 27001 require risk management, but do not ask for to specify the method. Would anybody like to comment on that?
Yeah, I can probably take this. So in general, risk assessment now involves not just the devices, or not just really the application itself. I think risk assessment has to be a much more comprehensive tool that includes now also the visibility and the individual application has to its surroundings. So the device can interact with other devices. So that interaction, that capability to interact and propagate probably includes also, should be included in the risk assessment score. So usually you want a score as well as then a trend in your assessment. And as soon as you establish a score, then you should also establish a goal that you're looking for. And then over time, you can make the changes that are necessary to achieve that goal. So it's a pretty comprehensive method that you need to apply to achieve risk assessment in that multi-cloud and distributed environment today.
Wonderful. I would like to, since we're running out of time, I just want to mention that there's one question also about a risk assessment. I'm going to quickly read it. While several one-to-one video call solutions provide end-to-end encryption, none of the video conferencing solutions is end-to-end encryption. The encryption is only between participants and servers, allowing the company operating the service to listen in to all of the calls. How do you assess the risk of video conferencing solutions that have servers located in foreign jurisdictions, especially in terms of government espionage and theft of trade secrets? Quick question to Shani. Maybe you have anything to comment on that? Again, you need to unmute.
Yeah. Well, it's a very tough question to answer, and it goes into great detail. But one thing that you can ensure is to choose your server where your meeting is located, basically. So we offer our Austrian clients, for example, that they can choose their service, their cloud provider within Austria. So that ensures that the meeting stays within Austria and doesn't leave the country.
Wonderful. We didn't give Manuel a chance to say what is the one thing you want our participants and our viewers to take away. So go ahead, Manuel.
So there's probably thousands of startups in the security space these days. I just wanted to speak for that innovative community and make sure that our customers, they stay open to embracing new solutions. The world is going to change and it keeps changing. I think keeping those old school solutions in place is more harmful than good. And I think as the market is being disrupted through cloud computing and through these massive amounts of devices at home, you also need to look out for new and innovative solutions. I think that is my...
That's a great way to end our panel. On behalf of Earl and myself and the entire Open Austria team, I want to thank first and foremost our wonderful panelists and experts to enlighten us on the complex and important and very relevant issue of cybersecurity, cyber threats, at a time where most of us are at home and those threats are in a way too close to home, as we said at the beginning. So really thank you for participating. Also on the participants side, we will continue with our series of the Open Salon in more or less 2 weeks. So stay tuned, look at our invites and our social media where we'll advertise it. Thank you very much. If you're watching us from Europe, have a wonderful Friday night and a wonderful morning here in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley. Thank you very much.